The works of Hayao Miyazaki are adored around the world, but one country that really loves the films of Studio Ghibli is France. The largest ever recorded collection of Ghibli memorabilia belongs to a French fan, and French artists have created some incredible Ghibli-themed works, including this stunning Howl's moving castle-inspired tapestry, which became so popular that the Hiroshima Prefectural Museum of Art asked to borrow it for a Ghibli exhibition. When Miyazaki visited Paris for the European premiere of Spirited Away back in 2001, he was named an Officer of the Order of Arts and Letters, a prestigious honour bestowed only upon those who have made a significant contribution to arts and literature. It was during this trip that Miyazaki visited a part of France that would inspire the architecture of one of his most beloved films, Howl's Moving Castle. On the advice of a friend, Miyazaki travelled from Paris to the Alsace region, where he fell in love with the traditional buildings. He was particularly enamoured by Colmar, with some real-life landmarks from the old town actually appearing in Howl's Moving Castle. The most prominent one is the Maison Vista, a beautiful building with medieval features that kick-started an architectural renaissance in Colmar when it was built back in 1537. It can be seen quite clearly in the iconic scene where Howl and Sophie walk on air above the town's bustling streets, which are all clearly inspired by the colourful, half-timbered Alsatian houses that Miyazaki saw on his trip. He actually returned to Alsace around 5 months before Howl's Moving Castle entered production to get a fresh look at the region that would inform a lot of the film's design. This was just one of the many times that France and its people have influenced Studio Ghibli's founders, Miyazaki in particular. In fact, the man who has influenced Miyazaki more than anyone else over the years is a French writer and pilot who inspired Miyazaki to go on a life-changing pilgrimage. In 1998, Miyazaki paid a visit to La Ferté-Alais airfield, home to the largest collection of aircraft in France. He wanted to retrace the steps of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a famous French aviator born in the year 1900 who greatly inspired Miyazaki with his writing. Saint-Exupéry was born into an aristocratic family, but his father died when he was young and they quickly ran into financial trouble without him. He worked odd jobs to support his mother and his siblings, ultimately joining the French army as a rank-and-file soldier. He made a big impression on his superiors during some flying lessons, and a transfer to the French Air Force soon followed. But his most formative experiences as a pilot actually came after he left the military. In 1926, having left the Air Force, Saint-Exupéry joined the ranks of Aéropostale, a pioneering aviation company that delivered mail by air all around the world. He initially worked the route between Toulouse and Dakar, the capital city of Senegal, but before long he was named as the new manager of Cape Juby, an isolated airfield in the Moroccan Sahara. Part of his work here involved searching for downed pilots and negotiating with the desert tribesmen that would sometimes take them captive. He wrote all about his incredible experiences at Cape Juby in his memoir Wind, Sand and Stars, which was released in 1939. A few years later, a Japanese translation of the book ended up in the hands of a young student by the name of Hayao Miyazaki. It quickly became Miyazaki's favourite book, and it had a profound impact on him.
現代はごく普通に平凡に人生を全うすることが一番素晴らしいと言ってるけれど、でも本当にそれだけなのかと思うとね、やっぱりそのサンテクジュペリの人間の土なんか読むとかき立てられて、なんかこのままこの地べたの上でね終わってしまっていいんだろうかって気持ちになるんですよね。と言いながら僕はサンテクジュペリはるかに長く机にかじりついてアニメーションやってきちゃったんだけど、もう後の祭りですけどね。
Miyazaki was so inspired by Wind, Sand and Stars that he wanted to recreate a journey that Saint-Exupéry took many times, flying from Toulouse in France to the Sahara Desert. He stayed at the Grand Balcon, the Toulouse hotel that Saint-Exupéry used, and he even got to sleep in the exact same room, number 32 on the 4th floor. Today, this simple room is decorated with photographs of Saint-Exupéry, who went on to become an award-winning author in the years that followed. The vast majority of his writing was inspired by his adventures in aviation, even his fiction. His most celebrated work is the novella The Little Prince, a tale of a pilot stranded in the desert who meets a young prince that fell to Earth from a passing asteroid. The story was partially based on a very real crash that Saint-Exupéry survived in the Libyan desert. He and his mechanic were stranded there for 4 days with nothing but some grapes, a single orange, some coffee, and half a pint of wine, because La France. They were on the verge of death when they were spotted by a passing Bedouin caravan who took them to a water source and saved their lives. When writing about this experience in Wind, Sand and Stars, Saint-Exupéry captured the adventure and the inherent danger which came with early aviation. And that's what really inspired Miyazaki.
あんまりこうパイロットよりもやっぱりそのパイロットたちのことを文学で残してくれた人ですよね。だからむしろサンテクジュペリがいなかったらメルモスにしてもギヨーメにしても今僕らが知るような形では伝わらなかったと思うんですよ。非常にその天候の書き方、飛行機の書き方、なんていうんですかね、空そのものとか、それから地上の人間とその飛んでる人間とのいろんな結びつきとか、そういうものについてその人間の土地っていうのはものすごく優れた作品だと僕は思ってますけど、星の王子様とは全然別な作品ですけど、その人間の土地の方が好きで、特に学生時代に繰り返し読みました。
Of course, Miyazaki was already very knowledgeable about flight by the time he came across Saint-Exupéry's memoir. His father, Katsuji Miyazaki, was the director of Miyazaki Airplane, a company that made a lot of money manufacturing rudders for fighter planes during the Second World War. Miyazaki's early life experiences exposed him to the business aspects of aviation, but it was Saint-Exupéry that introduced him to the romantic side of it. This is why aircrafts and flying in general play such a big role in a lot of his movies, and it's also why recreating Saint-Exupéry's journey to the Sahara Desert meant so much to Miyazaki, who made the trip in a plane similar to the one the Frenchman used during his eventful stint with Aéropostale. The Ghibli co-founder spent much of the journey staring out of a little hole that would have been used by a navigator in Saint-Exupéry's day, trying to imagine what the scenery may have looked like back then.
疑似体験ってだけじゃなくて、サンテクジュペリが見た風景っていうのを本当に僕らが見られるのかって言ったら、何も建物が変わってるとか車が増えたとかっていうだけじゃなくて、同じ緊張感を持って空を飛ぶことはもう不可能ですよね。ですからそれは断念せざるを得ないんですけども、ただそのこうなんていうんだろう、彼の僕が一番好きなところはここにとどまってはいけないって気持ちがこうそれをかき立てられるね、こうもんなんです。だからカモシカにそのカモシカがですね、そのライオンに襲われて死に物狂いのジャンプをする、その跳躍の瞬間にこそカモシカの本然がある。
One thing that Saint-Exupéry makes perfectly clear in his work is that while flying in those days was thrilling, it was also very dangerous, something Miyazaki alludes to in Porco Rosso. Released in 1992, this beautifully vibrant film follows an Italian pilot who fought in World War I and who's now working as a freelance bounty hunter chasing air pirates in the Adriatic Sea. The story takes place in 1929 when Saint-Exupéry was still working for Aéropostale, and there are clear similarities between him and the lead character. Just like Saint-Exupéry, Porco managed to pay his bills by flying after leaving the military, and there is evidence to suggest that Saint-Exupéry became disillusioned with life on the ground in his later years. Much like Porco, there's also an acceptance that the thing they love might one day lead to their death, which sadly came true in Saint-Exupéry's case. The life of the man who once infuriated his colleagues by circling above an airfield for an hour so he could finish reading a book came to a tragic end when he vanished over the Mediterranean. By this point, Saint-Exupéry had returned to military service. He actually travelled to America during the early years of World War II to try and convince the United States to join the fight against Nazi Germany, and he was later granted special permission to join the Free French Air Force, despite being way older than most Allied pilots at the time. Even with age against him, he rose through the ranks once more, reaching the level of major. However, old injuries from his crashes were starting to catch up with him, and he was no longer the pilot he once was. In 1944, he set off on a mission to collect intel on Nazi movements in the Rhone Valley and never returned. The famous author's disappearance made headlines around the world and would remain a major mystery until 1998, when a French fisherman found a silver identity bracelet bearing the names of Saint-Exupéry and his wife, the Salvadorian French writer and artist Consuelo de Saint-Exupéry. 2 years later, wreckage from his Lockheed P-38 Lightning was found off the coast of Marseille, and French authorities were finally able to confirm his tragic fate. This news no doubt caught the attention of Miyazaki, who had already finished his pilgrimage to Cape Juby by this time. Being able to see and touch the isolated Sahara airfield run by Saint-Exupéry was the highlight of his trip, largely because it still bore some resemblance to the place that Saint-Exupéry knew. While much of the route had changed due to the development of new towns and coastal resorts, Cape Juby was a time capsule, transporting Miyazaki back to a period that holds a special place in his heart. It was such an emotional experience for Miyazaki that the Ghibli co-founder was literally brought to tears.
いや、つまんないとこだったら嫌だなと思ったんですよ。でもなんか思った以上に綺麗なとこでしたね。いや、本当に感動しちゃったんですよ。こんなにね来ちゃうとは思わなかった。いや、来てよかったです本当に。サンテクジュベリに一番影響を受けたんですよ僕は結局。
Of course, Hayao Miyazaki has never been the sole force behind Studio Ghibli. He co-founded the company with the producer Toshio Suzuki and his late friend Isao Takahata. Takahata was the man behind the heartbreaking World War II movie Grave of the Fireflies and the stunningly animated folklore film The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, among others. What you might not know about Takahata is that he was actually a huge Francophile. He studied French literature at Tokyo University after falling in love with the culture, and he owes his career in animation to a French film that sparked his imagination and inspired him to enter the industry. The film in question is by the pioneering French animator Paul Grimaud, and it's called La Bergère et le Ramoneur, meaning The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep. Based on the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of the same name, it's about a romance between a beautiful shepherdess and a plucky chimney sweep that gets thwarted by a jealous king. After falling for the shepherdess, the king has the chimney sweep jailed to get him out of the way, but a kind mockingbird helps him escape and rescue his love. Grimaud actually had a big falling out with his producer when he released an unfinished version of the film without his approval in 1952, and he wouldn't actually get around to completing it until 1980, when an updated version of the movie was finally released under the title Le Roi et l'Oiseau, meaning The King and the Bird. Grimaud was understandably angry about what his producer did back in the 50s, but it's a good job that this happened, because if that unfinished version of the film had not been released, then Studio Ghibli as we know it today may never have happened. Isao Takahata saw The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep when he was a student, and he became obsessed with it, as he revealed during a 2014 interview with the British Film Institute. He said, "If I had not seen this film, I would have never imagined entering the world of animation. Refined colours and exquisite visual perspective creating a fantastical dimension, a series of unexpected ideas, spectacular characterization, the intense verticality of the world, unique humour. This film was way beyond established ideas at the time, and with its surprising and novel ideas, showed me the possibilities of animated films." Takahata wasn't the only budding animator in Japan who was being inspired by Grimaud at the time. His future friend and Ghibli co-founder Hayao Miyazaki was also falling in love with the French animator's work, which would serve as a huge inspiration to him as he embarked on his career. When Miyazaki was in Paris for the European premiere of Spirited Away in 2001, he opened up about his admiration for Grimaud during a press conference. He said, "I was formed by the films and filmmakers of the 1950s, which was the time that I started watching a lot of films. One filmmaker who really influenced me was the French animator Paul Grimaud." Miyazaki also sat down for an interview with French Vogue during his visit, and he brought up Grimaud when the magazine asked him how he felt about Disney movies. Disney was held up as the gold standard in animation when Grimaud's The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep came out, with the likes of Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, and Peter Pan being released around the same time. For Miyazaki, Disney films were well executed but ultimately soulless. He said, "They amused me, but they didn't make me feel anything. I much preferred La Bergère et le Ramoneur." While Miyazaki and Takahata are different in terms of their style and approach, one thing that their films have in common is that they make you feel something. It could be joy, it could be sadness, it could be nostalgia or melancholy or even anger in a few select cases. Ghibli films will always hit you in the feels one way or another, and they all have something meaningful to say, with themes like pacifism and environmentalism running through many of them. That's where the influence of Grimaud's work is most obvious. Like a Ghibli film, Le Roi et l'Oiseau features plenty of bright and colourful characters, but underneath all of that is a clear satirical statement about the pitfalls of power and the reality of totalitarianism. The links between Miyazaki, Takahata and Grimaud have been celebrated in France with an exhibition dedicated dedicated to all three men, and Takahata actually attended the opening ceremony in person. This wasn't the first or the last time that Takahata would visit France. In 2015, he was finally made an Officer of the Order of Arts and Letters, an honour previously bestowed upon Miyazaki. In his acceptance speech, Takahata said, "France is the country where I have travelled the most, and I am very happy to be decorated by the nation to which I feel closest." If you're French or Belgian, then you've no doubt heard of the late cartoonist and writer Jean Giraud, better known by the pen name Moebius. After Hergé, he was arguably the most famous and influential artist working in the Franco-Belge bande dessinée tradition. He made a name for himself with Western-themed comics like Blueberry back in the 1960s, but it wasn't until he adopted the name Moebius and moved into science fiction that he started getting recognised on the international stage. In April 1975, the first entry in his Arzac collection appeared in the French comics anthology Métal Hurlant, introducing readers to a strange new world. It's the story of a silent warrior who rides a pterodactyl-like creature through desolate landscapes that seem to represent the subconscious. 4 more entries were published before the end of the year, and Arzac became a big hit both at home and abroad. Moebius was actually hired by Ridley Scott to help design the world of 1979's Alien, and it was around this time that Arzac fell into the hands of another up-and-coming filmmaker by the name of Hayao Miyazaki. The Ghibli co-founder was blown away by Arzac, and he wasn't the only one. He said, "It was a big shock, not only for me. All manga authors were shaken by his work. We were really amazed when we saw Moebius's drawings. How to explain that? We had discovered a new way to look at the world." Miyazaki was just a few years away from releasing his hit manga series Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind at the time, and Arzac clearly had an influence on him. The art style may be different, but the motifs are very similar. Both take place in a post-apocalyptic, somewhat retro-futurist world with ancient technology and, of course, flight plays a big part. Nausicaa gets around on a glider rather than a pterodactyl, but you get the picture. Miyazaki has actually admitted that when it came to making the film version of his beloved manga, he was inspired by Moebius. He said, "I think he has an awesome sense of space. I directed Nausicaa under Moebius's influence." Miyazaki was one of many famous artists who contributed to the book Visions of Arzac, a collection of images inspired by Moebius's beloved series released in 1994. It was a special moment for him, but it also meant a lot to Moebius, because there was a big mutual respect there. Just a few years earlier, Isao Takahata told the French magazine Anime Land that both men regard the other highly, and there was even talk of a collaboration at one point. While that turned out to be little more than a rumour, the two would later get together for a joint exhibition in Paris. Running from December 2004 to March 2005, the expo at the Monet de Paris featured over 300 original drawings and attracted fans from all over the world. Perhaps the most exciting thing about the collaboration was the fact that the two artists agreed to sit down for a chat and discuss their careers, and it's clear from their conversation that they have nothing but admiration for one another. When Miyazaki asked Moebius how he learned to draw in such a unique way, he replied, "I had the presumptuousness around age 12 to 13 to think that I was the best drawer in the world, and after that, I spent my life running up to the belief. Sometimes I feel like I know how to draw very well, and some other times I feel like I am an extremely naive and ignorant drawer. Miyazaki, a star has touched you, a shooting star." It's clear that Moebius, Grimaud, and Saint-Exupéry all had a big influence on Ghibli's journey, and to be honest, the list goes on. There are several other French creatives who have shaped the studio's films, from master landscape painter Jean-François Millet, whose work is said to inform Miyazaki's preferred colour palette, to the author Maurice Leblanc, the creator of The Gentleman Thief, Arsène Lupin. Miyazaki and Takahata co-directed an anime series based on the exploits of Lupin's grandson in the early 1970s, and Miyazaki's first ever film was based on this same character. Takahata's first film, 1968's Horus, Prince of the Sun, is also full of references to classic French films, paying homage to the likes of Jean Renoir's Partie de Campagne and François Truffaut's Les Quatre Cents Coups. Both men were heavily inspired by France and its art during the formative phases of their careers, and that influence helped to shape the Studio Ghibli that we know and love today. As always, thank you so much for watching everyone, and let me know if your country has influenced Studio Ghibli in any way. My plan is to make a continuing series about all the different countries that have inspired Miyazaki and Takahata over the years, so if you would like me to cover any country in particular, then drop me a comment. I've already covered the UK's influence on Ghibli as part of this series, and the next video is going to be all about Russia, so make sure to subscribe for that. Cheers guys, I'll catch you in the next one.